Hello and welcome to our September VISTA member webinar, Resiliency and Service Wellness. My name is Chris Hawks. I'm a training specialist for AmeriCorps VISTA, and I'm a returned Peace Corps volunteer serving in Belize from 2010 to 2012. I'll be your host for today's webinar. You will also see our webinar support team, Mike and Steve from LSI, monitoring the chat and Q&A throughout the presentation. And leading our presentation today is Jinlin Wu. Jin is a VISTA alum and served 3.5 terms of service beginning in 1968. Jin is a teacher, a facilitator, curriculum designer, educational planner, mentor, and coach. We're super happy to have Jin, and you're gonna love her. We'll also hear from 2 VISTA leaders who we're super happy to have today. We have Daisha Humphrey is a VISTA leader serving at Mississippi State University in Starkville, Mississippi, where her service role is to build the capacity of the Maroon Volunteer Center. Also, Mary Sherman is a VISTA leader with Campus Compact of New York and Pennsylvania, working to engage higher education and civic service to build community health and resilience. We're really excited to hear from all 3, Jen, Daisha, and Mary, and we have a pretty packed hour, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. So Jen, you want to kick us off?
Thank you, Chris, and welcome everyone. Just really thrilled to be able to join you all today. The team has been preparing, and we're hoping deeply that what we have to share contributes to your resiliency and your service wellness. You'll notice that we've organized today's webinar around 3 topics. It's resiliency sharing, service and trauma care, and wellness planning. In order for us to do this in a good way, it's usually really a good idea to at least navigate using some working agreements. The team would like to propose the following working agreements for this particular webinar. One is, we're thrilled that you're joining us, and please participate at your comfort level. You have the chat feature to make comment, and we're welcoming all of your feedback. Also, we know it's hard, but if at all possible, please try to stay present during this hour. It's jam-packed and we have lots to share. We are both teachers and learners, and so let's get curious together. And if you have ideas and recommendations, we welcome them. And we just want to encourage folks to share what they know. So if that works for you, this is what we're proposing. And if there are other working agreements you feel that we need for this hour, we welcome them in the chat. Our first topic is about resiliency. And for me, I put on the slide my definition. It's really the ability to react or adapt positively to a difficult and challenging event or experience. I think that this conversation is particularly appropriate in the moment because we're all bombarded with different kinds of challenges. And so, every day we're asked to tap into our resiliency reserves. If you notice the diagram of the basketball shoes with the springs, this is an image that I think captures well, the ability to bounce back and to do that in a positive way. So we're going to spend the next few minutes just talking about resiliency. If you have other metaphors for resiliency or other words that you want to add to the definition, we welcome them in the chat, and I will remind you to toggle the all panelists and attendees. While we're going through the conversation, Chris is going to monitor the chat, so we welcome any of your comments about what resiliency is to you.
I see that some of those are coming in. Oh, did you see? Okay, yeah, there's a slight delay on my end on some of these. I can tell you what it's not. I like that, Ashley. Yes, I mean, it's the reason why we're here.
They're not basketball shoes. I think in
Growing
my
from a
neighborhood,
difficult situation into a stronger person. Sorry, Jen, interrupted.
no, please go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, just kind of, yeah, there's some good responses coming in, being able to thrive in stressful situations. And I am sure everyone here is and has been in stressful situations in 2020, looking 2020 in the eye and saying, is that all you've got? Love it. I love it. Adaptability, yes, keyword, being able to weather through difficulties, adapt again, seeing that word, that's a good keyword. Jen, you seeing any, a lot of good responses here.
Yeah, embracing change. I also appreciate the humor of folks correcting me on the shoes, but in my history and in my neighborhood, these were basketball shoes, but for other folks, not so much. But thank you for that. We just enjoy keeping positive.
Yeah.
Okay, on that note, I'm going to take us to the next slide that talks about protective factors. As we need to draw on our reserves, I want us to remind ourselves that we all have been gifted with a number of protective factors. You know, it is challenging times. We are facing quite a load each day, but each of us has been gifted with different kinds of protective factors that help us stay strong. And sometimes they're biological, they're social, they're psychological. You'll notice that on the slide, we put special emphasis on cultural and spiritual. I think sometimes we don't talk about cultural protective factors and spiritual protective factors, but when you think about what helps you get through a day, a week, a year, you know, I know that those things are included in that bundle. And when I think of my own history, I certainly can connect to the cultural and the spiritual. So just want you to think about protective factors as something that contributes to your resiliency. And in that vein, what I want you to think about is your heritage, your legacy. Yes, as individuals, we have amassed a bit of resiliency, but actually our communities, our family systems, our cultural memberships have contributed to who we are and how we're able to move on. So this is a pause in a webinar to really have us focus on that cultural heritage legacy that we all can draw from. And it could be your family system, it could be your community system. You know, we all belong to different networks, and I think it's just really important to think about those cultural groundings that help us. On the next slide, I'd like to share that when I think about my cultural groundings, I think of at least two things. You know, as we move through these days of sheltering in place or remote work or, you know, engaging in our communities where there is so much uncertainty economically, you know, politically, just a lot of struggle all around us. We draw on different things. And when I think about myself and what's helped me get through the days recently, I think of two traditions that were passed on to me. One being a food legacy. I come from generations of cooks, and we find comfort in preparing food for others and also find comfort in preparing foods that were passed down through generations. And so, you know, many of us are doing different kinds of mindfulness practices. And I actually can honestly tell you that cooking has become a mindful practice for me. So part of it includes giving thanks for the food that I have, connecting to the generations of people who have made this dish, and just sitting with people in the present moment and sharing food. In the resource packet, I've included my recipe for mushu chicken and mandarin pancakes. And you can make it gluten-free, you can make it vegan, you can make it vegetarian. So If you're interested, and I saw that many of you are cooks and bakers, I'd like to just share that recipe. A different tradition that I want to just share that has helped me get through the days is handwork. So I come from generations of people who use their hands to make things, to embroider, to sew. And if you look at the picture on the slide, some of you might recognize it, and it might resonate with Girl Scouts or grade school, but I never had a chance to use a loom and make pot holders like in the picture until just recently. And for me, when I'm watching the news, it just helps me to feel grounded, to make something and to make a gift for people. So I can tell you, I made 159 of these, what I call peace pot holders. And so I know that you all are doing different things to get by. I'm really happy right now to hand the mic over to one of our other team players, and they're happy to share with you some of their traditions. So Daisha?
Thank you, Jen. First, I would like to say that it is an honor to have this opportunity to speak with all of you about my personal experience regarding wellness during my VISTA service. I would like to share with you one practice that contributes to my resiliency. What keeps me grounded and sane during difficult times and when I do arts and crafts, specifically creating selfie frames. I've always done arts and crafts with my mom and dad, and it was always gave me a calm feeling whenever I sat down and made different crafts with them. As I grew older, I stopped because I thought I was too grown to do that anymore, until I realized that I needed more now as an adult. I started back this practice in 2017 when I had a lot on my plate as a graduate student while being a full-time VISTA. As I started to make my very first frame, I realized how much it catered to my body and mental state in a positive way. That is when I knew that I could make this a hobby and a business because it catered to my wellness and living. I have a small business known as Glossom Frames, and what I do is create selfie frames for different events and occasions. I make these frames in their own unique way because each frame is created differently based on the customer's preference. While I work on my frames, I feel at peace. My frames help me to escape the world into my own world of creation. As I express myself through my creations, I feel at ease, my mind is calm, and difficulties are forgotten at this point. I think of my craft as a way to let all of my frustrations out into my work to create a masterpiece for others. For instance, I may have encountered a task on my VAD that was quite difficult to complete, and I just could not catch a break from it. The task definitely drove me insane. But once I came home and started to work on my frames, this practice gave me an excuse to put forth effort into my creations while having a peace of mind. Overall, the ultimate goal of my frame business is to cater to events to make them light up the room and bring a spontaneous vision in photos. That alone brings light into my world because once I am finished with my artwork, I feel relieved. I really do feel as if a heavy weight has been lifted off my shoulders because I am so busy focused on something that I love and have a passion for. I always let out a big sigh because not only have I accomplished a task, but I accomplished my recovery from difficulties that I face at work as a VISTA leader. Thank you all for listening. Now we will hear back from Jen.
Thank you, Daisha. Actually, I'm going to turn it over now to Mary, but I just love hearing, your strong voice come through the resiliency and just lovely practices. Thank you. Mary.
Hello, hello. Well, thank you both for sharing some lovely insight about what you do, how you keep resilient and keep pushing on. So in my own experience, in the start of the pandemic, I moved out of my host site. So with the onset of the pandemic, I was a VISTA member at the time. And I decided to stay with my partner in the Bronx. He is actually pictured at the bottom left-hand corner with his very first jack-o'-lantern. Happy Halloween, I love the season. Anyway, even though most of my family resided upstate. And while I had my partner, he was at work on the days that I had off. So the only person I had in my physical radius was gone much of the time. And so now I tend to be more on the introverted side. I really love my alone time, but it got to the point where I started to feel secluded and almost as if the walls were starting to close in on me. Now, I grew up with a large, loud Italian family, and I've always been surrounded by my chosen family anywhere I went, whether that was in theater, on the lumberjack team, on campus, or at my service site. I realized I was missing my friends, my family, and colleagues. So I made the intentional effort to reach out and just set up some times to chat. Over Zoom, we had happy hours, karaoke nights. Singing and music is such a huge part of my life. The CCNYPA Vistas who are here can also attest to that. Played phone games against each other and just set times aside to chat and play with those goofy video chat filters on Facebook. I really love the foot one. I think that's hysterical. This energy was just so crucial to me being able to live in the epicenter in New York City and get through the apex of the pandemic. So it was just so important for me to reach out and to take that initiative and to stay connected with my loved ones. And so if you are sitting here with someone on your mind that you haven't reached out to in a while, text or call them today. Nothing special, just a simple hello. And I promise it will make a world of a difference for the both of you. And now I shall hand it right back to Jen for a fun activity.
Yeah, we're good. Thank you, Mary. So the chat goat is spinning, and it's such lovely support words as well as people sharing different things that are part of what contributes to their resiliency. So I want to pause at this point and actually acknowledge some of the things that have already been put in the chat. And Chris, if you'll help me out, I saw that folks are singing, folks connected to doing things with their hands and cooking. People appreciated the ideas that we shared. Lots of people in terms of seek out nature, which is a part of growing their resiliency. And
Yeah.
go ahead, Chris.
Oh, go ahead. No, there's great responses coming in right now, really fast, and also from the introduction slide at the beginning about what you do for fun. Those kind of go hand in hand. If there's something that's been passed on to you, seen, like you said, Jen, seen a lot of art, cooking, nature walks. I forget who it was, but someone said they're a drummer in 3 different bands, which that is awesome. I love it. Music is coming up a lot, and that's something for me as well. Just music is huge in terms of resiliency, and it's something sometimes I forget about it, and I'm like, wow, I haven't listened to anything in a couple of days. I need to really jam out or listen to something to get back on track. Gardening, baking, yeah. And the responses are still learning from lessons, reading for fun, and a lot of fiction books. We've seen them come in. Walking my dog. I'm there with you, Roxanne. Definitely. Skateboarding, love it. Journaling, meditating, taking a walk, ukulele and singing. I would love to learn to play a ukulele.
Church, prayer, lots of dancers. That's great. So, this conversation is our hope that when you feel just stressed out and you're struggling, that you're able to take a breath and remind yourself that you come from a tradition of resiliency, and that we don't have to look far to find inspiration, and that we've all been gifted with different kinds of practices to keep us sane, to keep us whole, to keep us connected. So just thank you for all the sharing that folks are putting in, and I love the fact that the comments are also bilingual. So thank you. I want to talk a little bit about trauma. you'll see on the slide the image of this stormy sea, and trauma is really, a result of feeling overwhelmed and being burdened with an excessive amount of stress. And sometimes it feels like our reserves and our ability to cope and integrate what's going on is just really challenged. You are serving in a very, I think everybody serves in a special time, but in our world and in our country right now, it just seems like with COVID-19 especially, that we're up against a lot. So during this time, we want to talk a little bit about trauma, and it's really just important for all of us to be as trauma informed as we possibly can, and it really relates to our current situation. What we know is that often you can observe fatigue and burnout in other folks, and it's much harder to look at yourself and understand that you're taxed to the max, or that you're close to just really, burnout. But what we know is there are physical signs, there are attitudinal signs. It can show up in our relationships. It can show up in our mental outlook, and we want to make sure that we're vigilant of ourselves and of the people around us that we're working with, serving with, and living with. And so just, because trauma and unaddressed trauma actually looks a lot like fatigue and burnout, just want you to be aware that it's normal to feel overwhelmed at this point, but also to look out for the signs in ourselves and each other. On the slide, we have the grief cycle that I know many of you are familiar with. And it's not uncommon during a time of a number of traumatic events, especially if we're on trauma overload. And also because we're witnessing together in this world a lot of a loss of security, a loss of lives, a loss of normal. And so you'll notice that there are 6 stages in the grief cycle. And this is just a normal cycle. And we all will go through this number of times in our lives. But you may find yourself, at one of these stages. And I just want you to give yourself permission to be okay with that, that we are witnessing and experiencing a lot. And so it's not uncommon, not only to respond to an overload of trauma, but to be possibly in one of these stages of the grief cycle. And each of us is different, and it happens differently at different times. And we could move quicker through it, or we could, go backwards, or return to a former step. But this is just normal, and I think our awareness of it does help. On this next slide, I wanted to share, because I think it was really an aha for me when I saw it. So you'll notice in the middle of this slide, it's about traumatic events and what happens when we have a normal amount of trauma. So we all have that, and we vacillate through it, and we move through it. A number of traumatic events, and our systems have mechanisms in which to deal. However, when we're on overload and we have quite a bit of undischarged trauma, unaddressed trauma, it's coming at us so quickly, it's not uncommon to be stuck on an on position. We're not regulating in the normal way just because there's so much. And it exhibits itself in 2 ways usually. When we're stuck, it can be that we're hypervigilant. It's that exaggerated startle response. We're kind of looking out for the next shoe to drop. We're just kind of flooded with emotion, and it's invading our sleep, and we get fits of, anger sometimes, and it's really hard to relax. which is a normal response to too much trauma. In the same vein, you'll notice at the other end of the diagram, some of us respond in a hypervigilant way, and another way is to pull back. And it's that freeze part of the fight, flight, freeze response. And we can just feel numb, and we can feel tired, and we can feel like, we want to sleep, and we just withdraw. All of this is to say that given where we are, just, be okay with the fact that this could be happening. But also, if you find yourself unstuck, we hope that you seek out a trusted friend, a trusted colleague, a trusted supervisor, or someone to talk it through. Because what we do know is the unaddressed trauma left in the body can erode our health. It can erode our sleep. And so just a gentle reminder to think about, where are we on this trauma barometer? And would it help if I were to seek out just someone to talk it through? Mike, I'm sorry, I just actually want to go back to that last slide for a minute, please. In terms of so when you're in that traumatic stress, I want you to think about the resiliency reserves that you can draw on, not only just your practice, but I think that all of us have survivors in our lives whose stories and experience and courage that we can, draw on to help us. People who have survived, we who have survived lots of different traumatic and challenging things in our own personal history. So I remember being with AmeriCorps members during Katrina Rita, and how we had to rally together, and how people just thought that they couldn't, survive the sorrow and the loss. And we just worked together. And when I look back on those days, I know, well, wow, we were able to live through something like that. And so, that kind of helps all of us. So I hope that you're thinking that way too, that you are, from a generation and a history of survivors, and we have lots of role models from which to kind of find our way through traumatic stress. Just really quickly, we want to recognize that some of you have been serving during this whole time of COVID-19, and service has looked remote and has looked, different already. And then some of you have been serving, or might be in your second or third year of service, where this looks quite different. Your service is very interrupted. No matter what we know is that you are making accommodations continually. You are adjusting, and we're so appreciative of that. I mean, we just have to kind of roll with it. And right now, what I'd like to do is invite Mary to share some of her experiences making accommodations with disrupted service.
Thank you very much for inviting me back to the podium stage. So I will be reflecting on my experience as a VISTA member at Mercy College, rather than my present experience as a VISTA leader. So I served as the program coordinator of the Campus Food and Resource Pantry, known as the MAV Market, and I oversaw basic needs response initiatives. So pre-COVID, I had been between 3 campuses throughout the New York City metro region. I became engulfed in this constant state of doing my service project, going to school, doing class readings, all that fun stuff. And then when the pandemic hit, and I couldn't do what I had been doing originally, what we at the pantry had been doing originally, it felt like the wind had just been knocked out of my lungs. And for a moment, I really felt like what I was doing was useless and pointless almost. But I had to sit myself down and reflect on what I was doing and how the work was purposeful. but I needed to think of innovative ways to serve the Mercy community. I had to accept the reality of the state of the world and move forward. I had to ground myself before I could serve my community. I am no savior, and I will not operate in the belief that I am one. And of course, all the while ensuring my basic needs were met, registering for SNAP or food stamps, creating a very detailed budget, caring for my physical health through nutritious foods and movement or exercise, grabbing items from the pantry and whatever else I needed to feel secure, brushing off any senses of shame that arose. I'm a very big advocate against any type of shame that one feels from utilizing a service that supports them. And I'm also a big proponent of incorporating wellness into everything that I do. And I've shared the wellness guide that you all have access to that I created for my VISTAs at CCNYPA, just to be able to, get some resources, help ground yourself, as you navigate this year of service, because I always say to the CCNYPA VISTAs, this year is unlike any other. So this framework really helped guide me, and I hope that it provides some support to all of you. So once I was able to ground myself and reconstruct that foundation, I was able to move forth in power and strength to best serve the Mercy College community. We moved operations online. We connected folks with their local pantries, helped to get them registered for SNAP, cash assistance, TANF, not just in New York, but we had students coming from Pennsylvania, California, Connecticut, New Hampshire. We had folks throughout the entire nation. We had international students, and I was also engaging volunteers in virtual opportunities. I knew that the world had become so hectic that it would be a disservice for me to believe that this work was useless. I had to get creative, I had to ask for help, I had to rest, and I had to reimagine what the operation could look like. While there were definitely limitations and crying sessions for sure, the efforts and services we were able to accomplish made a difference in the lives of our students and our community. And so for that, I am eternally grateful. And as my service year began to wind down, I would be transitioning into a VISTA leader position through the Campus Compact of New York and Pennsylvania. And while, this was not my initial career trajectory, and I'm sure there are folks in this webinar that are, in a similar situation. I've been a VISTA for 2 years. I had to again reflect on my values and really incorporate them into this upcoming year. I am dedicated to building an equitable higher education system, both in the private and public sector, focusing on the fulfillment of basic needs as a pathway to educational achievement and personal success. And I bring this passion with me to my VISTAs in the cohort, and will continue to provide effective, immersive, supportive programming to, support them as they navigate a year of service unlike any other. It is my passion that drives me forth, and I am so excited to see all that I am able to accomplish, but more importantly, all that the folks in the CCNYPA cohort and all of the AmeriCorps members can accomplish both this year and beyond. And I am going to pass it right on back to Jen.
Thank you, Mary. Before we take up the care strategies, I'm watching the chat, and I just want to acknowledge the different kinds of adjustments and accommodations folks have made. So I noticed that some folks are actually seeking out counseling to help with dealing with the trauma. And then there were a number of folks mentioning the SNAP benefits, and also I think an equal number of people who have been really working with their supervisors to make the different adjustments and accommodations, to talk it through and to make a plan and to really negotiate together, like how could we keep service going in the best way. I want to share with you that one of the VISTAs that I had a chance to talk to, she told me that she negotiated now a 3-hour lunch. And it was more, she just restructured her week because she felt that she was sitting at the laptop or computer too much, and that she wanted to then build in her day wellness, time for physical activity and stretch and some healthy activity. So she negotiated so that she has 2 or 3 hour lunches that includes getting, some food, but also going out for a walk and doing some things to make her just that much grounded more grounded. And she's still able to keep the volume of service that she had been doing, but she just wanted to just adjust her days a little bit to just be even more healthy. Chris, have you noticed some other comments about adjustments and accommodations folks are making?
Looking through, my chat is lagging a bit. There's a lot of great responses coming in, but specifically on that, I haven't. And that's not saying it hasn't come in. So we would definitely invite you all to contribute to the chat. And general reminder, to all panelists and attendees, unless you prefer it to only be to the panelists for us to view. But yeah, we'll give it a couple seconds to see what responses, what other care strategies, and we'll give it a couple seconds. Set boundaries. When you won't answer emails, texts from work. Yes, that was Lucia who said that. Totally true. Especially for those of you who may be teleserving. It's so easy to mix work with, after work hours, your comfort. So set those boundaries. Make sure they're separate. That's a great tip. Discover new things. So new hobbies for sure. Clear communication. Make time for yourself, setting aside time and doing something you love to do. Having clear expectations, mentoring. You seeing others here, Jen? It's going fast now, which is great.
People recommending setting up a regular schedule, getting up from your desk every 45 minutes, really a healthy practice, just taking more breaks. Great. So that actually transitions right into the slide that we currently have up around different care strategies. So appreciate what people are putting in. And I want to just highlight with actually Dacia's help, the care strategies. So we're going to talk about the need to do regular check-ins, the need to do intentional fun, to maintain healthy boundaries, and when possible, raising other people up. Right now, Dacia, you're a great role model in this, so walk us through your care strategies.
All right. So I have a lot of care strategies that I use to encourage my mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual wellness. For my mental state, I make it a task to go hiking every month or every other month, even during the winter season. I absolutely love nature, so I enjoy the peace and quiet that nature brings to my mind. I love the hiking trails that leads to a beautiful waterfall at the end. It reminds me of the difficulties I face as a VISTA leader. Though there may be struggles through the process, there's always beauty at the end of the tunnel. For my emotional state, I cook. Before my grandmother passed away last year, she used to cook for her family 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, every single day. She never missed a beat. Her food would be so delicious to eat, even if it was just a simple bologna sandwich. I realized through the years that she cooked with love. She put her emotions into her cooking, which made it taste so delicious. After she passed away, I decided to take it upon myself to continue that tradition. I cook for my family a lot, and I cook with emotions, with love. I realized that cooking helps with my emotions because I feel so happy, joyful, and at ease whenever I am making a new recipe. As for my physical state, I love to exercise. I made a decision that no matter what happens in life, I will always cater to my body because it is my temple. Not only that, but it helps me to release any frustration that I have out of my mind and into my workouts. Whenever I have a bad day, I work out extremely hard. It definitely reduces my stress levels. Finally, for my spiritual wellness, I pray and meditate. This is an everyday thing for me. Sometimes, honestly, I don't feel like praying and meditating, but I know that whenever I do, I feel a little calm and my mind is relaxed.
Thank you, Daisha. You know, the hour is moving very quickly. I hope that in our sharings, you've been able to get some different ideas or to reconnect with some ideas about moving forward even stronger. Daisha modeled for us what seems to be a real effort to maintain balance. And that's so important in our lives as we're trying to survive and also thrive. So you'll notice that on this next slide, we have a very similar framework to what Daisha just modeled. You know, to think about ourselves and our full selves. So there's the mental, the physical, the social, emotional, and the spiritual. And what we want to invite you to do is in this coming month to be very intentional about your wellness and to think about what one thing, you know, not 10 things, but one deliberate thing can I do in each of those quadrants to make sure that I'm living a life in balance, you know, to take care of all the parts of you. And so we're really asking you to take a moment and just either draw or write yourself a couple of notes about, okay, for the next 4 weeks, what's one thing that I'll commit to furthering my own mental health? And what's one thing that you'll do to further your physical health, social, emotional, and spiritual? And what I can tell you is that most of us are stronger in some of the quadrants than others. And so I would encourage you to really think about the ones that especially would bring more balance to your life. In addition, our suggestion is to do it with a support partner or a care buddy. I think that everybody can use support to be more grounded, more resilient, more well. And so what we'd like to suggest is that you draft a plan, you recruit a partner. It could be a friend, it could be a neighbor, it could be an office mate, it can be anybody you choose. But for you to agree to do it together, do a plan, and then lend mutual support over the next 4 weeks. And you can decide what that mutual support would look like. It can be a text message, it can be, we'll check in on a chat or something, you know. But I think that definitely our wellness is connected to the wellness of people around us. So if we're going to do anything, we're going to invite you to really take care, good care, and to make a plan. And if you could please find someone to be your care buddy or your support partner, we think that it will not only benefit you, but also your partner. At this time, I'm going to hand this back to Chris, because Chris, I think we have some time for some questions.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, Jen. So yeah, I think on this next slide, so we're going to get to the Q&A in just a second, but we'd also ask that you please take a few moments to give us feedback on the webinar, and just know that we're constantly reviewing the content and trying to make it better for our future webinars. So we take your feedback very seriously, and we'd love to know how we can improve it, or what works, what didn't, what we should expand on or emphasize. So we thank you in advance for sharing your feedback. And you see there's a link for that survey in the chat, and also as you close out, it should open up automatically. But so let's get to Q&A, and if you have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A pod, which is located at the bottom of the Zoom screen. And one thing I'll just, I saw this in the chat. I'm not sure if it's in the Q&A as well, but someone mentioned, oh, I worked at a previous position, and they laughed at me when I requested a mental health day, which totally agree with whoever said that. That is ridiculous. And I just want to mention a reminder that, you have, as a VISTA, you have 10 days for medical and 10 personal. But you could certainly, if you're starting to get to that point where you're burned out, or you're just feeling really down and you need that mental health day, you could certainly use one of those 10 medical leave days for a mental health day. Just want to point that out. So let's look in the Q&A. Okay, and Jen, I'll kind of throw this your way. So we have a question on what is a good way to bring up to someone that might be in the trauma cycle, but they don't realize it themselves? Do you have any suggestions for bringing that up to someone?
Well, that's a really good question. Yeah, because I know too, lots of times we're all in denial, so I think that if you have a good trusting relationship with this friend, I might say something like, I really care about you, and I hope that you hear this in the way that I want to share it. I'm just a little worried. I just went to a seminar or webinar where we learn more about, what trauma looks like, and I just, want to have you think about, this is what I'm noticing, and if you need, if that resonates with you, and if you need any help or anything, I'm here for you. I think I might say something like that. And Mary and Daisha, if there's other ways that you think about how to approach it, please chime in.
Yeah, basically that is a good question, but I was thinking more of maybe try to do different activities with them that leads up to like an aha moment, like, I never knew that I was, traumatized in a way. So like maybe finding different activities that leads to that point, if that makes sense.
Lovely. I think sometimes indirect works even better. Also, maybe there's a reading that you could share and say, I read this and I found it helped me a lot. I was just want to share it with you. And it might, talk about being trauma informed or what was going on in terms of being on trauma overload.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mary, did you want to add anything in?
I'm going to be completely honest. I have been keeping my eye on the chat box this whole time. And, I think there's no shame in saying that I don't know what the question was. So could we please repeat the question for me so that I may reflect on it?
Absolutely. Yeah, no problem at all. So the question is, what is a good way to bring up to someone that might be in the trauma cycle, but they don't realize it themselves? So what would be a good way to bring it up to them?
Mm-hmm. I think it's always so important to approach a situation from a sense of groundedness and understanding where you're coming from in this perspective, and being reflective within yourself as to why you're approaching this person. You see that they're in a situation of distress, of trauma, and you want to provide them with support. You want to help them, but you also need to be very, I don't want to say careful, but mindful of how you navigate that conversation, and think of ways that you've had conversations with them in the past. How do you communicate? Like, I have my best friend, we are quite vulgar with each other. We use inappropriate terminology, if you will, to refer to each other. And this is just how we talk, and it's how we feel comfortable with each other. So I would approach him very differently than how I would approach, let's say, one of the volunteers that I would serve alongside. So being mindful about the language that you're using, and not trying to come off as like a personal counselor and saying, you know, everything. Just being mindful about the way that you use your language to approach someone who is in, you know, the cycle of trauma. And just word from me, do not, or try to refrain from reflecting on your own experience during that conversation, being like, oh, this is what I experienced, or this is what I did. It really is about grounding yourself in that conversation, about them hearing about them, and finding and navigating that conversation.
Thanks, Mary. I think also, just as a friend, just regular check-ins just help, you know, just checking in and sharing how you're doing and asking people to vocalize and give voice to how they're feeling, and just honoring what people offer up. And people in the chat are also making suggestions. So thank you for that. Just lots of, it's great to have all of us thinking together and supporting each other.
Agreed. It's great to see. But yeah, thank you all for those answers. And just seeing another couple questions in here. First, just logistic-wise, someone mentioned they were late and missed the beginning. Will there be a recording? Just want to point out that yes, there will be a recording of this posted to the campus. We will include the handouts there as well. We'll send a follow-up email to everyone attending as well, so you have that recording and the links to the handouts. And I see another question here. I struggle to make time to get up from my computer throughout the day while I'm serving remotely. And this is kind of a VISTA specific, but might turn to Mary and Dacia. So to make time to get up from the computer, stretch. If I get up and stretch 5 minutes every hour, do I need to say I took a 40-minute break the whole day? Or is it just expected that I'll need to get up and reset throughout the day? I'll say a 5-minute break every hour, absolutely, go for it. Everyone needs it, do it. I do kind of want to point this question to either Dacia or Mary to see if you, just because as a VISTA leader and working with VISTAs, knowing that, you know, there's going to be breaks needed. There's a lot of stress throughout a VISTA year, especially 2020. Do you want to add anything to that or have any recommendations in terms of like letting their VISTA leader know or their supervisor know beforehand?
This is Mary. So I am a huge advocate for your wellness comes before anything else. Your life, your existence comes before a project. You can't pour from an empty cup, if you will. The VISTAs at CCNYPA will attest. I'll tell them, if you're not feeling well right now, for instance, I was working alongside someone who was feeling very stressed and having some just issues with their self-image, things along those lines. I told them, the last 30 minutes of the day, I want you to write down 3 things that you love about yourself. It is so important to reflect on the beauty and the power and the strength that you hold within yourself to be able to move forward in power and in justice. It is so important to take those moments to love yourself. And I think that there is this concept that, the professional realm is so different from your life, when in reality, your profession, your work, your service, that is simply a branch off of your humanity. You cannot separate the two. So if you need to take that 5-minute break, if that's all you need, then I say go for it. Articulate it to your VISTA leader, of course. I don't want to speak on behalf of all of CNCS, AmeriCorps, or VISTA leaders, or state or national, whichever branch you so come from. Make sure you articulate it. Be straightforward. If you're not straightforward, or if you don't want to articulate it to your VISTA leader, at least be honest with yourself at the end of the day. So again, focus on your wellness before anything else.
Thank you so much, Mary. And I know we're getting towards the top of the hour. There are still a couple of questions in the Q&A, and we'll try to answer those, but we also want to be respectful of time, so we'll try to answer those privately in the Q&A in these last few moments. But we will move on to make sure we And I just want to pass this to Jen for the next slide.
Thanks for all of the messages of support. And on behalf of the team, I would just like to thank you for your service again, and thank you for this time that we've shared together, and just express to you that our hope is that you will stay well and that you will be able to draw from this webinar some inspiration or idea or relearning and I live in the Pacific Northwest, and I think that sometimes poetry, is what we need. And Chief Dan George has passed on, but he was not only a tribal chief, but he was quite a poet. And I wanted, on behalf of the team, to share his words with you. May the stars carry your sadness away. May the flowers fill your heart with beauty. May hope forever wipe away your tears. And above all, may silence make you strong.
Thank you so much, Jen. As we finish this off, we just want to thank you so much for attending this webinar, and we certainly hope you can take something from this, and as well look forward to our next webinar that we show on the slide here, conducting community assessments. It's a pending title, but it's going to be regarding community assessments next month for our October webinar. Be sure to check out the webinars page. We'll also send out an email invitation to register for that webinar, and we certainly hope to see you next month. And this concludes our presentation for today. Again, thank you so much. I want to thank Jen and Daisha and Mary so much as well. But thank you, Vistas, for attending and for all that you do in your communities. It's so appreciated, and I don't think that you are thanked enough. So just want to give you this Thursday thank you, big thank you to all of you for what you're doing and your service.